So the other day, I wrote down every project I'm in the middle of and thing I need to wrap up and stay on top of in this notebook, and there's absolutely dozens and dozens of projects, and I looked at it and I identified the low-hanging fruit, and I did the only adult reasonable thing, which is ignore it completely and instead spend the last 2 days making this. So I didn't model the ship. The ship was modeled by Kyaw and uploaded to Sketchfab under Creative Commons Attribution. So I'll put a link below. It's a really fun model. It's the Swordfish 2 from Cowboy Bebop, which is still one of my favorite animes from the 90s. And the whole environment is obviously just an extension of the last video I uploaded, which is turning drone footage into kind of usable assets. Honestly, these cliffs don't really hold up. Which is why the camera has to keep moving so fast. Because if you actually got a good look at it, you'd be like, oh, this is kind of just a blob, isn't it? But yeah, the whole scene is actually just made up of two little scans repeated over and over. I'm pleased with how well it worked. The whole point of the shot was trying to figure out these little vapor trails coming off of the wings, because when you're doing some sort of like aerial chase, because there's no point of reference, there's no ground or anything to go by, it's hard to tell where things are moving sometimes. Like if you're filming from plane to another plane, that plane just is effectively staying still. And so if you can have something coming off of the plane to kind of show the path and like the relative motion, that can be fun. Also, it just looks cool. Like in Cowboy Bebop, they use it kind of like skids, like when the ship is skidding, which I think is really fun. And I looked at a bunch of reference and I wasn't able to really tell if that's how it worked in real life or if it was just like a cool stylistic thing. It's a low pressure. It's when the wing like creates a low pressure area in the air where the ambient water vapor is able to condense in that lower air pressure. And it kind of makes sense you'd get a larger low pressure area than usual if the plane is banking hard through the air, making, you know, maybe not as aerodynamically as possible. Anyway, so I did that, and then I just kept adding all this other, like the heat distortion and this kind of vapor or this smoke trail behind it. And it was all ended up being really straightforward, so I thought I'd just go through all of it today. Maybe starting with a really quick animation breakdown, although that's not really what this will be about. The animation path is just a Bezier curve, which I tried to set up. I don't know if this is how actual planes work, or if this is just how, like, I play with planes when I was a kid. Like that kind of, I love that banking, as if you're kind of going through a half pipe type feeling. So I tried to emulate that with this curve a little bit. And to get the ship to follow the curve, under the Constraints tab, I just go to Follow Path and put in that curve. And where is it? Yeah, so the first thing I do is I put it right there. You can see the dotted line shows the point at where it's connected. What's cool is you can still animate this like independently. And so it gives you kind of the overall guide, but you can still tweak things if you want to, which I think is cool. So okay, here we go. We line it up here, and I'm gonna say follow curve, and that makes it actually follow the banking. Although again, you can still like be like, go like that, or go like that. Which we will be doing in a second, mostly just to get the banking like this. And you might be thinking like, all right, how do we control the speed? Because there's the offset time, but otherwise the ship just kind of does its own thing. And those options are actually under the curve properties. And yeah, under the curve panel, you check path animation. And I don't totally understand why it's set up the way it is. So 226 frames, that's how many frames it takes the object to move across the length of the entire path. Right here. But there's also evaluation time, which shows where along those 226 frames you're at. So if we like get rid of these keyframes here, we can say, okay, well I want to start on frame 225, which is here at the end, and then you can be like, and then I want to go to effectively frame whatever. And I'm just thinking this is a very bizarre way, instead of like percent or something like that. But that is how you work with it, and it's, you know, it's not that hard. And if you want to dial in the speed, like have it start really fast and then slow down like this, woo, that's how you do that. Oh, and a random tip, these curves actually have like a beginning and an end, but they're not indicated in any way. So sometimes you set it the whole path, but then the ship is like flying backwards along it. You just have to right click and go down to switch direction, and then the ship will fly the other way instead. Once you have your ship animation all figured out, I like to jump over to the camera. I like to animate like the camera kind of linearly and have the ship do the moving as if like it's somebody strapped into an airplane or some vehicle, like just having to trace the action. And so I like having the ship do kind of the more interesting stuff. So I'm gonna add one keyframe here. Oh, I have auto keyframe turned on. Go to the end and add another keyframe here. You can see right now it kind of is going to ease into the motion right here. So it starts slow and then it goes faster. So I'm going to hit V vector, and that makes it go straight. In fact, I'm going to select all of these and hit V vector. that gives me an animation kind of like this. You can see we go through walls and stuff, so I'm going to just animate the camera so location-wise it's more or less staying in the middle of the canyon. And here, yeah, there we go. And then I do a rotation pass. Here I'm going to delete the existing rotation and the scale because that doesn't matter. And just go somewhere, hit I, add a rotation keyframe. I typically go ahead like maybe 20 frames just because I feel like people's ability to follow a thing is like within a half second. So if something moves, I like to have a little delay. And so just kind of jumping ahead, being like, yeah, here we go. In fact, I'm going to turn on auto keyframing and just keep jumping ahead. And I'm going to try to just frame up the shot more or less like every 20 frames. Honestly, trying to make each part of the shot look pretty good. And always trying to get kind of like a decent composition on all of those key points. And here, let's see, we'll dial in the ending here, and let's see how this looks. And yeah, this is feeling pretty good. If you want, you can go in and like the Z location, change the height so we're going over, you know, different terrain. I like giving the camera kind of a feeling of swooping too. So we'll kind of like, we'll go high, and then we go, maybe we'll kind of go low, and then whoa! I don't know. That's a bit much. But then I'm gonna use the camera Shakeify add-on that Nathan and I made. Let's see. Let's do investigation, which. What I like about investigation is it actually moves around in space. In fact, I might double that so that as we're moving, we're kind of warbling all over, while also still keeping the camera fairly smooth. And then on top of that, I'm going to add here, let's raise the camera up a little bit so we're not literally hitting the bushes. On top of that, I'm going to add good old bike on gravel, but turned way, way down to like, you know, this, just to make the whole thing feel a little bit less clean. In fact, this might even be a little bit too much. Cool, now let's actually make the ship follow the curve a little bit more. I always want the ship animating for where it's going to be, like in the next few frames, like it goes, you know, like this before it starts actually curving. I'm gonna add a keyframe here, and then I'm gonna move ahead and just like try to anticipate. It's already trying to go in this direction. And that's what gives it that kind of fun skidding feeling. So now that we're here, I want it to flip around so by the time we're over here, it's kind of going the other way. And do the same thing kind of here. And this, like, if you watch the animation and thought like, oh, that looks kind of cool, it's that always leaning into the curve, which kind of gives it that feeling. In fact, I always hate having to animate stuff like in real time because I'm like, oh, what if I animate it and it sucks? But this actually looks kind of cool. Okay, sorry. Okay, now the vapor trails. There's a lot of different ways we could do this, and the first way that comes to mind is trying to do an actual smoke sim, which actually probably could give you the best results overall, but at a cost of it being an absolute nightmare. No, so smoke sims work really good within a domain, and their resolution is based off of the size of the domain. It's kind of subdivisions in of that area. If you have a smoke sim that's moving very fast, that domain has to be absolutely huge, and that means the resolution within that huge domain has to be gargantuan. And there are ways you can check adaptive domain, which does keep the domain around the smoke sim, and if you give it like a quick fade off rate, you know, you can keep it kind of small, but it can still be, you know, fairly big, take a long time to compute, and getting the look that you want can be just more intense than you might think. When it does work, it's absolutely gorgeous. The second way you can do it is with like a particle system, and honestly, particle systems are awesome. I did this sequence for an Andrew Bellware film a few years ago, and the stuff underneath is fine, but like I threw all these particle systems on it. Like I think that's like 100,000 pieces of sand flying around, and suddenly the whole thing just feels so textural and rich and detailed, and it only took a few minutes to get set up. Anytime a ship is damaged, you know, just having debris flying off of it is really fun. I think I talk about it quite a bit in the Hyperbole simulation tutorial. I can link below. But at the end of the day, it also just like I didn't want to have to deal with 100,000 little particles trailing off of the wingtips. I wanted something that was really easy. And so yeah, this is just a string of vertices with a cloth sim on it. So let's get into that. I'm going to create a plane, and you can see at the center of the object there's this orange dot. That's the origin. So I'm going to tab into edit mode and just line up this front vertex with the origin. Delete these other ones because we only want one row. Gonna pull this back a little bit, and using Control R, I'm just gonna add a bunch more points here. You can see in the bottom left, I'm gonna add like number of cuts, 44. Okay, and the front one is the one I want to actually attach to the plane tip. So I'm gonna select it, and under the data properties, I'll create a vertex group called attach point, yes, and assign that point to the vertex group. All right, what should we do next? Next, let's skin it. So under the modifiers tab, I'm going to add skin, which just adds geometry around the row of vertices. I love it. Here, we'll go into X-ray mode so that when we tab into edit mode, we can see the vertices inside. And using Control A, we can change the scale. I'm going to make the whole thing just very small here. I'm going to select this front one and turn on proportional editing. So if I hit S, or wait, Control A, and make it larger, look at that. We can scale the area of influence up and down, so I'm just going to make it kind of like that. And then we have this nice tapered shape. We can check shade smoothing. When we're done, we'll want to throw a subdivision surface across the whole thing, just because it's easy and can smooth stuff out. But okay, let's jump over into the physics properties and check cloth. Now it's a cloth sim falling into the abyss. So let's go down to shape, and pin group, we'll select the attach point. And now, look at that. So you notice it's being a little bit crinkly, and that is because the cloth is underneath the skin modifier, which means it's doing a cloth sim on kind of the whole sock. We can speed things up and clean things up if we move it above. So now it's only trying to simulate this single row of vertices and not, wow, what is happening here? I'm not sure, actually. I probably still have some force fields. I'm working in the project file that I already made, and I probably have an old turbulence force field acting on it. I said I can't find it. Here, select by type empty, and let's see. There's none of these are force fields. What's going on? Well, we'll see if that problem just kind of goes away. Okay, I'm gonna move this over. I'm gonna go to frame 0. Frame 0, it hasn't really started the cloth sim yet, so we can do stuff to it without having to battle the simulating cloth. And I'm gonna line this up with the wingtip. And actually, here, I'm going to select this, then shift click on this and hit Control C, copy rotation, which just matches it to the rotation, the orientation of the ship. That's using the copy attributes add-on, which you have to activate in the preferences, but it does come included in Blender. But that means now I can hit R, X, 180, flips it around, and now I can just line it up nice and easy. I want to make it longer, so I'm going to hit S double Y, so I'm just scaling it on its own Y axis, then Control A, apply scale, just in case. Tab back into edit mode, and let's see, I'm going to move it over to the other wingtip here. And one thing I did for the animation, which was kind of overkill, but I did kind of like it, was, oh, I still have proportional editing on. Turn that off. I'm going to line this one up here, and using Control A, I can make it really big. In fact, let's make these other ones smaller. Just Control A, make them nice and small. And cool, okay. Parent this to the ship, and is that, let's see what happens here. Yeah, there we go, and it's dangling around its little vapor trails. Okay, so that just means we have to tweak some settings. Let's go down under the cloth properties to gravity, field weights, and turn that down, and now they won't be trying to fall into the ground. They're still flopping though, and that's just because they have too much mass. So let's go up to the top here. I'm going to turn vertex mass to I don't know, maybe 0.1, and what does that do? And that works pretty good, except they're still kind of being flung all over, so I might even turn the mass down, or I can also turn up the air viscosity, which is like the air thickness, which means that the tails are less likely to actually fling around. And actually, I turned the vertex mass and the air viscosity way down and turned up the turbulence, gave it an emissive shader, and I got this crazy lightning storm situation on my earlier test, kind of a lightning squid. Actually, I'm keeping lightning squid for myself because that's gold. You'll notice, though, there's lots of weird glitch frames, like this, or like the whole ending, it's like there's a perpetual motion blur, and that's because the cloth sim is happening on top of a rotating frame of reference. It's parented to the cube, and while it looks good, stationary, it always has this motion blur of the rotating cube on top of it. So what I ended up doing, and what fixed a lot of my long-suffering problems, was going under the object properties and just unchecking motion blur. Just, we don't need it. The camera motion blur will still be on top of it. It'll still fit in the scene really good. But yeah, that I was getting all these render glitches for hours, and that just fixed it. And the internet's currently out, so I can't look it up, but I think I may have misused the phrase long-suffering problem, because it's not the problem, which is long-suffering, it was me. And so when I was first doing my test, I thought I'd figured it out. I was like, oh, wow, okay, that looks really good. But if you make these too long, here, I'm gonna make them really long just to demonstrate this. Here we go. As you watch it fly around, you can see it's actually pulling like it taut behind it. You can really see that it's all just a solid object. It's cutting off the curves, and you end up in situations like this where it's like the thrust is following the curve, but I'd like it to be coming out the engine a little bit more. So to fix all of that, let's go to the ship here. We're gonna use a wind force field that's basically just blowing straight out the back of the ship, so it'll blow the vapor trails just straight back when it's by the ship. So Shift S, cursor to selected, Shift A, force field wind. There we go. I'm gonna parent that to the ship, and then do that same thing. Control C, copy rotation to copy the orientation, so I can rotate it and just point straight backwards. I think we want something really strong to blow it, like 40,000 or something like that. And also, we only want it to happen when it's around the ship. So let's check max distance, and I want it to fade off over a fairly good radius, so I'm going to change the power to like 3 and just crank this. This is something, whenever it comes to physics stuff, you're going to end up dialing things in. Okay, and yeah, changing this to like 50,000 in this case, and dialing in the max distance really did do a lot. It's kind of more coming straight out the engine now, and but it's still following the curve pretty good. Right now though, the paths are just like really smooth, which is kind of cool in a stylistic way. Like if you're trying to do something like the Akira bike trails, or what was it, clock stoppers or something, where you just see all of like the tail lights leaving this little streak, you could parent this to that tail light and have that effect if you just put like an emissive shader into the volume slot of the material, which could be fun to do sometime. But I want it to kind of look as if like the wind vortices are being ripped apart, and there's kind of like pockets of air and stuff, just to really add that feeling of speed. And so to do that, I'm going to add some turbulence. And actually, what's cool about this this wind force field here is that ideally it'll help blow this stuff coming out the back of the ship straight back, so it'll be kind of like intact, and then it'll start to dissipate once we get beyond that radius for these bits here at the end. So let's see. Let's create a turbulence force field here, and I want the strength to be, I think these numbers are all very dependent on what the vertex mass is. In fact, I think I probably should have had this at like 0.01, because right now I think these are actually pretty heavy. I probably should have had both the vertex mass and the air viscosity way down, but I think we can still work with this. That's just a tip for if you're trying to do it. Strength, I'm going to do like 500, and size, I'm going to do like 0.2, which I think means you break each of these squares into like 5 chunks, and each one kind of has its own orientation, which should add a lot of noise. But let's see. Let's see how it works. Okay, it's a little bit weird. It always looks weird too before it gets like volumetric. Yeah, I changed the strength. I kept the strength at 500, and I changed the size to 0.1. And I'm liking this. It's mostly smooth, but also it does get like a little bit wiggly here towards the back. Okay, now let's do the materials. Here, select this. Go to the materials panel. Click new. Over here, I'm going to turn this into the shader editor. Great. And right off the bat, I'm going to delete this. Hit Shift A, shader, volume scatter, and plug the volume into the volume. And look at that, it's already looking pretty good. If we want, we can go texture, noise texture, plug that into the density, and I don't know what a good setting is here, but in fact, it'll be a lot easier if I Control Shift click on this so we can see what the texture is doing. And right now there isn't much variation, but here, let's put it through a color ramp. And if we pull that up, okay. And actually here, I'm going to create an empty over here just to control the scale of this noise a little bit easier. So under noise texture, I have Node Wrangler turned on, so I can hit Control T and get these other mapping nodes. I'm going to change it to object, and the object in question is going to be this one right here. And so now, whatever we scale this to be is going to be the scale of the noise. And if we move it like along its axis and stuff, we're actually moving the noise. Sometimes it's just easier to work this way than like trying to figure out how to do it all with the mapping nodes. But yeah, this looks pretty good. I'm going to turn the scale down to like this, I guess, because I want to have periods where there aren't really any clouds, and maybe turn the detail up to like 4. I don't know. So this is going in volume scatter. Right now, this means maximum. It's going to have a density of 1. You can select this right here and change the white value to like 5, and then it'll be a lot more dense. And here, let's dial it in a little bit more. I like this. Okay, and now you can kind of see it feels a little bit square in some of these cross sections. So I'm going to add my subdivision surface over the top, and that just makes it tube-like. And all right, so this technique, I designed it mostly for the wingtips, and it's a bit much for the engine here. It's just like very tube-ish, and so I might kind of shorten this one up, and so it's only just a little bit coming out of the back of the engine, but that's still okay. And actually, I should bake this right now. So I'm going to select this cloth sim right here, and I'm going to go down to bake. There we go. And that just locks the whole simulation in place so that you don't accidentally tweak something and everything explodes. If you ever want to update it or you tweak the animation or something, you just hit delete bake and then bake again, and then it'll rebake it with the new updates. So yeah, okay, this is feeling good. I did have a lot of heat distortion coming out of the back of the ship, which I think added quite a bit. I already did the big refraction tutorial, heat distortion tutorial a while back, so I'll just put a link to that below if you're curious about that. But I also had this kind of like random dust cloud moving behind it as if it's kicking up dust, which I think added some really fun kind of like dynamics and texture to the whole thing. And it was really easy. It's just this thing I made right here, and I think this is one of my exhales, but I just like looped it and tiled it, and so it just does this. I'll include this in the description if you want to download it and use it for anything. But yeah, let's load this into Blender. F3, images as planes. Here's our continual wide fast puff. Import that. And where is it? There we go. I'm going to set it up behind the ship. That's looking great. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this and create a transparent and a translucent shader. I love translucent because it just reacts with whatever the light is doing. So I think which one did I add? Translucent and transparent. Combine them together into a mixed shader, and the factor will be the values of the video. So where it's white, it'll be translucent, and where it's black, it'll be transparent. Or nothing will happen. Here, let's try swapping this. Oh, let's also try connecting the shader to the surface. Yep, looks like I had it right the first time. Cool. Okay, and if you want to dial it in, adding a color ramp is usually a great idea. It means you can like make it really intense or tone it down. In this case, I think it's kind of a good... Well, let's start with it really intense because I want to actually do something. So the one thing in my first render test that threw things off was wherever it intersected with the ground, that was really obvious. And so I wanted a way for it to automatically fade out before it intersected the ground. And that ended up being not very hard. Actually, here, so what I ended up doing... I'm jumping all over the place, I apologize, but I duplicated it so I had multiple layers, and I just would rotate it, and so I had multiple versions. So the whole thing felt a little bit more volumetric. But, yeah, okay. There we go. And that's where by the time we do all of this, we probably want to change the white value here to like gray, and so we can see it, but it's not like super intense. But here, let's keep it at 5 right now. But okay, here, I'm gonna go into local view, let's go into material preview here. And I'm going to create an empty. Let's create a sphere here. And this is going to control the visibility of this steam. So I'm going to add another mix shader here, which can also mix with transparent, except using a gradient. And so we'll be like, all right, we can only see the top, and the bottom will be invisible, controlled by this sphere. So let's create a gradient texture here. Plug the color into the factor, and hit Control-T. And yes, I think this is all just going to work. We're going to use object, and the object will be the sphere. And now there should be a way. Yeah, there we go. We can wipe it out like that. I want it reversed, so I'm going to flip it 180 degrees. But now this sphere controls the visibility. This also controls the hardness based off of the scale of the sphere. So, but that means now we just scale and place the sphere so that it's kind of just hovering right above the ground here, so we don't have any intersection problems. Great. Okay, I'm going to turn this value back down to like, I don't know, 0.5. And I'm going to turn on auto keyframing, and I'm just going to go through like kind of placing it behind the ship like this. Maybe kind of lagging behind a little, as if it's kind of a cloud being left behind it. Cool. And now it'll just kind of hover, wait down here where it took off from. But right now, it's not moving. Here, let's check cyclic, and now it'll actually be doing kind of a smoke cloud thing. I love this texture. It's really handy. But yeah, keeping it subtle is nice. Jump back into cycles here. But yeah, I like it. It feels dynamic. It's cool to have like a single ship move through, but then there's a bunch of other stuff kind of happening because of the ship. It makes it feel as if it's like powerful. This is all just exactly what I did for this other render, except adding the heat distortion, which is, again, that's a whole little video. It's not hard to set up really, but I'll just link to that video below and include the video textures and stuff. And I'll get back into making the environments and finishing that making a shot series real quick here. I got distracted and it was a lot of fun. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for hanging out.